A fist slammed down on the hood of a pickup truck. Rain hammered the metal. A flashlight beam swung across a man's face and held there, blinding him. "Step out, now." A hand grabbed his shoulder and shoved. Boots splashed through the puddles at his feet. A second man moved to the back of the truck, and in the dark, he lifted a heavy duffel bag over the tailgate and dropped it into the bed. Inside the cab, a dog started to growl. The man in cuffs said nothing. He watched. He waited. His name was Marcus Devereaux, and 20 years in the United States Navy had taught him exactly when to stay silent. What these two officers didn't know was what Marcus kept folded inside his jacket. What happened in the next 10 minutes ended 2 careers and cracked open an entire precinct. Stay with me on this one. Let me back up and tell you how Marcus ended up on the side of that road. It was a Tuesday night in Savannah, Georgia. The kind of rain that doesn't fall so much as sit on you. Marcus Devereaux was driving home in a 1994 Ford pickup. The paint faded to the color of old dust. In the passenger seat sat Ranger, a Belgian Malinois with ears like radar dishes and eyes that never stopped moving. 70 pounds of muscle and loyalty. The two of them had been together 6 years. Where Marcus went, Ranger went. That's not an exaggeration. The dog rode to the grocery store. The dog rode to the hardware store. The dog had a spot in that passenger seat that was worn down to the shape of him. Marcus was 44 years old. 6'2", shoulders like a door frame, a graying beard cut close. He kept his hands at 10 and 2. He drove the speed limit. He was the kind of man who signaled a lane change on an empty road out of pure habit, because habit is what keeps you alive in the places he'd been. He didn't fidget. He didn't check his phone at red lights. Everything about the way he moved was slow and deliberate, like a man who had learned the hard way that fast movements get people hurt. And where had he been? 20 years in the United States Navy. The last 12 of those as a SEAL. 2 tour where the paperwork still says the location is classified. He had pulled men out of water they were never supposed to survive. He had walked into rooms nobody else wanted to walk into. And when he finally came home, he didn't go quiet. He went to work for the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, a federal special agent with a badge and a gun and a very particular assignment. Now here's a thing about a man like that. He'd spent his whole adult life in situations where staying calm was the difference between going home and not going home. Panic was a luxury other people got to have. Marcus had trained it out of himself one bad night at a time until stillness became his default setting. You could put him in front of a burning building or a broken tail light and he'd have the same heartbeat. That's not a talent. That's 20 years of practice. But the 2 men walking up to his truck that night didn't know any of that. All they saw was a big black man in an old truck on a dark road. Here's the thing you need to understand. Marcus's taillight was out. That's it. That's the whole crime. A cracked red bulb on the driver's side. He knew it too. He had the replacement part sitting on his kitchen counter at home. He was going to fix it that weekend. He'd already bought it. It was a $2 bulb in a little cardboard package next to his coffee maker, and he'd walked past it that very morning. The cruiser lit him up from behind, blue and red bouncing off the wet road. Marcus checked his mirror, put on his blinker, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder nice and slow. He killed the engine. He rolled down his window. He put both hands on the wheel where they could be seen. He told Ranger in a low voice to stay. The dog went still, but those eyes kept moving. 2 officers got out. The first one was Lyle Tanner, late 30s, lean, a mustache he was proud of, and 8 years on the force. Tanner walked like a man who had never once been told no. The second was Rusty Kowalski, younger, heavier, nervous energy in his hands. Kowalski did what Tanner told him. That was their whole relationship in a single sentence. Tanner came to the driver's window. Kowalski hung back by the truck bed, his flashlight sweeping the tarp in the back. "License and registration," Tanner said. No good evening. No reason for the stop, just the demand. "They're in my jacket," Marcus said. His voice was calm and even. "I'm going to reach for them slow. My dog's trained. He won't move unless I tell him." Tanner's light went straight into Marcus's eyes. "That's a big dog." "Yes, sir." "You got a permit for a dog like that?" "Now you don't need a permit for a dog." Marcus knew that. Tanner knew that, but Marcus just said he's a working dog, registered and chipped. He didn't argue the point. He didn't correct the officer. He'd learned a long time ago that being right and being safe are two different things on a dark road, and only one of them gets you home. Marcus handed over his license. His hands were steady. Everything about him was steady, and I think that's what bothered Tanner most. Because Tanner had done this stop 100 times, and 100 times the man in the truck got nervous, sweaty, talkative. That nervousness was the thing Tanner fed on. It told him who was in charge. It told him the pecking order of the night. Marcus gave him nothing. No stammering, no over-explaining, no trying to charm his way into being liked. Just a calm man with his hands on the wheel and a dog who wouldn't blink. And to a man like Tanner, calm from someone he'd already decided to push around doesn't read as innocence. It reads as a challenge. Tanner took the license back to the cruiser and ran it. And here's where it went wrong for them. The name came back clean, spotless. No warrants, no record, a veteran, a homeowner. And something else came up on that screen that Tanner didn't understand and didn't bother to read closely. A flag. A note that said this individual's information was restricted. Contact your supervisor. Tanner saw the word restricted and decided it meant trouble. He decided this quiet man was hiding something. He should have called his supervisor. That's exactly what the screen told him to do, in plain words he'd been trained to follow. Instead, he walked back to Kowalski, and the two of them had a quiet conversation by the tailgate that Marcus couldn't hear over the rain. But the dashcam could. And so could the little camera clipped to Marcus's own dashboard, the one glowing a soft red the whole time. What Tanner said to Kowalski by that tailgate we know now, word for word, because it was recorded. Tanner said, "This guy's dirty, I can feel it." Kowalski said, "His record's clean, Lyle." And Tanner said, "Records lie. People like him always got something in the truck." People like him, 3 words. Let them just sit there for a second. Kowalski shifted his weight. He wasn't a good man, but he wasn't as far gone as Tanner, not yet. There was still a version of the night where he could have said the wrong idea out loud and stopped it. "We got nothing to search on," he said. "Taillight's not enough." And Tanner smiled. "Then let's give ourselves something." Here's where the night turned into something that couldn't be turned back. Tanner walked to their cruiser and opened the trunk. Inside, wrapped in a black gym duffel, was a package they had taken off a real arrest 2 weeks earlier and never logged into evidence. Bricks of a controlled substance, taped tight, the kind of thing that puts a man away for 15 years. Tanner had been holding on to it, waiting. This is the part that should chill you. He had done this before. The duffel was insurance, and Marcus was just the next name on the list. Think about what that means for a second. This wasn't a hot temper. This wasn't a mistake made in the heat of an argument. This was a plan Tanner had carried around in his trunk for 2 weeks, patient, waiting for the right kind of victim. Somebody quiet, somebody alone, somebody a jury might look at and assume the worst about. He'd been shopping for a face to hang it on. And that Tuesday night, on Route 17, he thought he'd found one. Tanner carried it low against his leg so the dashcam wouldn't catch it clean. He walked to the bed of Marcus's truck. And while Kowalski stood there and watched and said nothing, Tanner unlatched the tailgate, swung it down, and shoved that duffel deep into the bed, up against the cab, under the blue tarp Marcus kept for hauling. Inside the cab, Ranger's growl dropped an octave. Low, steady, the kind of sound that comes up from the floor of an animal. Marcus heard the tailgate. He felt the truck rock on its springs. And in that moment, Marcus Devereaux understood exactly what was happening to him. Not a guess. Not a fear. He knew. He'd spent 4 months of his life studying men who did precisely this, and now one of them was doing it to him. Most men would have shouted. Most men would have started swearing, twisting in the seat, demanding a lawyer. That reaction is human. It's also exactly what gets you shot on a dark road. Marcus did the opposite. He went calm the way a lake goes calm. He put his hands back on the wheel. He looked straight ahead. And he said quietly to a dog who couldn't answer him, "Easy, we're okay, stay." He wasn't just talking to the dog. He was talking to himself the way he always had before the hard part of any job. Slow the breathing, slow the heart. Let them make the mistakes. Tanner came back to the window with a new energy in him now. The energy of a man who has already decided how the night is going to end. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. "Am I under arrest?" "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus opened the door slow. He stepped out into the rain. He was a full head taller than Tanner, and I want you to picture that because Tanner didn't like it one bit. Tanner told him to turn around and put his hands on the truck. Marcus did. Kowalski came around with the cuffs. "We're going to search the vehicle," Tanner said. "You got anything in there we should know about?" "No, sir." "Nothing at all?" "Nothing that was mine when I parked it." That answer, "Nothing that was mine when I parked it," Tanner didn't catch it. He was too busy enjoying himself. But it's on the recording, clear as a bell, and later on, in a room with fluorescent lights and a whole lot of nervous lawyers, that one sentence would land like a hammer. Because it proved Marcus knew. It proved he'd felt that duffel drop and named it out loud on tape before anyone ever pulled back the tarp. Kowalski clicked the cuffs around Marcus's wrists. Tight, too tight. Marcus didn't make a sound. He just flexed his fingers once and let his hands hang. Tanner walked to the truck bed like a magician who already knows what's under the scarf. He pulled back the tarp. He lifted the duffel. He unzipped it right there in the flashlight beam and let out a low whistle. "Well now," he said, "look what we got here." Kowalski leaned in and his face did something complicated. Because seeing it there in the light made it real in a way the plan hadn't been. A plan is just words by a tailgate. This was a felony sitting in a stranger's truck, and Kowalski's name was going to be on the paperwork right next to Tanner's. Tanner started reading it off like it was Christmas morning. "That's intent to distribute. That's felony weight. Son, you are done." He was already talking about the truck getting impounded, already talking about the number of years. He had Marcus by the arm and he was walking him toward the cruiser, and Marcus was going without a fight, head down, rain running off his beard. And to Tanner, this was over, open and shut. Another quiet man in the back of the car. He'd done it before and gotten away with it, and he had no reason on earth to think tonight was any different. That's the thing about getting away with something. Do it enough times and you stop believing there's any version of the story where it goes wrong. Kowalski put a hand on Marcus's head and guided him down toward the open back door of the cruiser. Marcus sat. His long legs barely fit. The door didn't shut yet. Tanner was filling out the start of the report on a soaked clipboard, whistling through his teeth. Kowalski lit a cigarette with shaking hands and blew smoke into the rain. For a moment, everything went quiet. Just the rain on the roof of the cruiser, the tick of the cooling engine, the two officers standing easy now, the danger past, the arrest made, another routine night on Route 17. They thought it was over. It hadn't even started. Then from the back of the cruiser, a voice. "Officer Tanner." Tanner looked up from his clipboard, annoyed. "Save it for the station." "Before you write another word," Marcus said, "I need you to reach into my jacket, left inside pocket." Kowalski laughed, a short nervous bark. "Yeah, we're not reaching into your jacket, big man." "You're going to want to," Marcus said. For your own sake, left inside pocket, there's a wallet, open it. Something in the way he said it, not a plea, not a threat, an instruction, the voice of a man who has given orders to people whose lives depended on obeying them. Tanner felt it crawl up the back of his neck, and against his own better judgment, he reached through the open door into that wet jacket and pulled out a slim black wallet. He flipped it open. And the rain kept falling, but everything else in the world stopped, because it wasn't a driver's license behind that plastic. It was a badge, gold, federal, and a photo ID card with a blue seal and words that Tanner read 3 times because his brain refused to take them the first 2. Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Special Agent, Marcus J. Devereaux. That's a federal badge, Marcus said, still calm, still cuffed, still sitting in the back of their car. I'm a special agent with NCIS, and I need you to think very carefully about the last 20 minutes. Kowalski's cigarette fell out of his mouth. He didn't even notice. Tanner's hand started to shake so hard the badge rattled. This is fake, he said. This is, you bought this. This isn't. Call it in, Marcus said. Call your dispatcher. Give them my name and my badge number. It's printed right there. Go ahead, I'll wait. Tanner didn't call it in. You know why? Because deep down in the part of him that had seen that word restricted on the screen and ignored it, he already knew. He knew the flag. He knew what a restricted federal record looked like. He talked himself out of it once tonight. He couldn't talk himself out of it now, with the gold sitting in his own trembling hand. And here's the part that turned Tanner's stomach to ice water, because Marcus told him the rest. For the last 4 months, Marcus said, a federal task force has been building a corruption case on your precinct, missing evidence, planted narcotics, arrests that don't add up. We had a name for it, and we had a pattern. And what we didn't have was one clean, recorded example of an officer doing it start to finish. He let that sit. You just gave me one. Marcus nodded toward his own truck, toward the dashboard where a small camera glowed soft red in the dark. That's been recording since the second you turned on your lights, he said. Audio and video, cloud backup. It uploaded the first 10 minutes before you ever opened your trunk. Everything you said by that tailgate, everything you did with that duffel. It's already sitting on a server 300 miles from here, and there is nothing either of you can do about it. Inside the cab, Ranger started to bark, sharp, hard, echoing off the wet trees. The dog had heard the shift in his handler's voice, and every muscle in that animal was ready. Tanner spun toward the truck like he might rip the camera out with his bare hands. Marcus's voice stopped him cold. Don't. You put one finger on that vehicle, you add tampering with federal evidence to the list. And believe me, the list is already long enough. Tanner froze with his hand halfway out. Rain ran down his face. He looked, for the first time all night, like a man who understood he was the one in trouble. Now, if you've made it this far with me and your heart's going a little faster than it was 5 minutes ago, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one, where the quiet man turns out to be holding all the cards, that's what this channel is about. Subscribe and stay with me, because what Tanner did next only made things worse for himself. Tanner's brain was doing the math of a drowning man. Okay, he said. Okay, let's just take a breath here. This is a misunderstanding. We can pull the duffel. We can uncuff you. Nobody has to. There's no reason this has to go federal. You're negotiating, Marcus said. On camera, that's your second mistake in the same minute. Kowalski made a sound like a man about to be sick. He backed away from the cruiser, hands up, shaking his head. I didn't touch it, he said. Lyle, tell him, you put it in there. I didn't touch that bag. I was just standing there. Shut up, Rusty. I'm not going down for you. And there it was. The whole thing Tanner had built his operation on. One scared man doing exactly what he was told, snapped right in half on the side of the road. Kowalski was already talking, and once a man like Kowalski starts talking, he doesn't stop. You could see it happening in real time. The fear that had kept him quiet for years had just found a new direction to run, and it was running straight away from Tanner. Here's the thing Tanner still hadn't figured out, and it's the cruelest part for him. Marcus hadn't been hunting them that night, not specifically. He was driving home, off duty, a broken tail light, a real one. They pulled him over for something small and true, and then they chose, all on their own, to make him the villain in their story. They picked him. Out of everybody on that road, out of every truck in Savannah, they picked the one man in Georgia they should have driven right past. The odds of that. A crooked cop with a bag of planted dope goes fishing on a rainy Tuesday and hooks a federal agent who's been building a case on his exact crime for 4 months. You couldn't write it, but it happened. And it happened because Tanner had gotten greedy and lazy at the same time. And those two things together will sink anybody. "Uncuff me," Marcus said. Nobody moved. "Officer Kowalski, the cuffs now." Kowalski looked at Tanner, and for once in his life he didn't wait for permission. He came around, fumbled the key, and got the cuffs off Marcus's wrists. Marcus stepped out of the cruiser slow, rubbing the raw red marks on his skin, and stood to his full height in the rain. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, and somehow he was the tallest thing on that whole road, taller than the trees, taller than both of them put together. "Open the cab," Marcus said. "Let my dog out. He's not going to touch you unless I tell him to, but he's coming to my side." Kowalski opened the passenger door. Ranger hit the ground and was at Marcus's left heel in half a second, 70 pounds of teeth and attention, eyes locked on Tanner. Tanner stepped back. "Now," Marcus said, "we're going to wait right here, all three of us." Because about 9 minutes ago, when I didn't answer a scheduled check-in, a very specific process started. Tanner's eyes went to his own sidearm. Just a flick. Just a thought. But Marcus caught it because catching that exact thought in another man's eyes had kept Marcus alive on 3 continents. "Don't," Marcus said, soft, almost kind. "You've got planting evidence and a false arrest. Those are careers. Those are not lives. The second your hand touches that weapon on this camera, it stops being about your job and starts being about the rest of your years. Ranger will reach you before the holster clears. I promise you that. So take your hand and put it on your head." For a long moment, the whole road held its breath. Tanner's fingers hovered. Kowalski whispered, "Lyle, please." Ranger's lips peeled back off his teeth without a sound. Tanner put his hands on his head, and that's when the road lit up. Headlights. Not one set. 4. 2 unmarked sedans and 2 state police cruisers came around the bend on Route 17 and boxed them in, front and back, light bars screaming silent blue into the rain. Doors opened. Men and women in windbreakers with 3 big yellow letters on the back stepped out with badges on chains and their hands near their hips. The check-in Marcus had missed had done exactly what it was designed to do. That's the part Tanner never understood about the man he'd picked. Marcus didn't need to win the fight on that road. He just needed to survive it long enough for the machine behind him to arrive. And the machine always arrived. A woman in a soaked NCIS windbreaker came straight to Marcus. Special Agent in charge Dana Whitfield, his supervisor, the one who'd built the corruption file with him for 4 months. She looked at the cuff marks on his wrists, then at the 2 officers, then at the open duffel sitting in the truck bed. "You okay?" she asked him. "I'm fine," Marcus said. "It's all on the dash, first frame to now." Whitfield allowed herself the smallest smile. "Say it for me anyway." Officer Lyle Tanner removed an unlogged package of controlled substances from the trunk of his patrol vehicle and placed it in my truck bed while I was detained, Marcus said, clear and level, for the third recording now running. Officer Rusty Kowalski observed the act and did not intervene. I was arrested on manufactured charges. Every second of it is on camera. Tanner started to talk. Started to say it was a joke, a setup, that he'd known who Marcus was the whole time, that this was entrapment. Every word only made it worse. A young state trooper turned Tanner around and put him in his own cuffs, and Tanner learned in that moment exactly how tight he'd made them, because the trooper didn't make them tight at all, and Tanner still couldn't stop shaking. Kowalski didn't wait to be asked. He put his own hands behind his back. "I'll talk," he said. "Whatever you need. I'll tell you all of it." The other stops. The other guys, all of it. Whitfield looked over at Marcus. "Told you the young one would fold." "He folded before you even got here," Marcus said. "The rain stopped a little after midnight. By then the duffel was logged into federal evidence, photographed, sealed, and signed, the way it should have been logged 2 weeks earlier. Marcus's truck was released back to him. Nobody impounded it. A trooper even offered to follow him home. What Kowalski gave them over the next 3 days cracked that precinct wide open. He named 4 other officers. He named 2 more stops just like Marcus's, 2 other men sitting in county lockup on charges that never happened, both of them released within the month with their records wiped clean. Think about those 2 men for a second. Real people. Somebody's son. Somebody's father. Sitting in a cell, telling anyone who'd listen that the dope wasn't theirs, and nobody believing a word of it, because who believes that story? It took a federal agent getting the same bag dropped in his truck for the truth to finally have a witness nobody could shout down. The corruption file that Marcus and Dana Whitfield had spent 4 months building went from a stack of suspicions to a federal indictment with names and dates and a cooperating witness. Some nights, one arrest is just one arrest. And some nights, one arrest is a loose thread, and you pull it, and a whole rotten thing comes apart in your hands. Lyle Tanner didn't talk his way out of anything. He had a good lawyer and a bad case, and the case was bad because the case was on video, start to finish, in high definition, with sound. There is no cross-examining a camera. He took a plea in the end rather than let a jury watch that footage. He's serving his years right now. The mustache is gone, so is the badge, so is the walk of a man who's never been told no. Kowalski cooperated all the way through. He'll carry a felony and he lost the job and he deserved to lose it. But the judge noted on the record that he broke ranks on the side of that road when it counted, and it took years off his number. Marcus, when they asked him, didn't argue for more. "The scared one told the truth the second the truth got hard," he said. That's worth something, not everything, but something. That's the kind of man Marcus is. Marcus drove home that night the same way he'd left, 10 and 2, blinker on the empty road, Ranger in the passenger seat with his ears up. The tail light was still out. He fixed it himself the next morning in his own driveway with the part that had been sitting on his kitchen counter the whole time. 10 minutes with a screwdriver. That was the entire crime that started all of it. A 10-minute fix he just hadn't gotten to yet. He never raised his voice that whole night. He never threw a single punch. A man who had every reason and every right and every ability to put 2 crooked cops in the dirt just didn't. He sat in the back of that car with his hands cuffed too tight, and he let the truth do the work, because he'd learned a long time ago that the loudest man on the road is almost never the strongest one. Now here's the part I keep coming back to. Those 2 officers looked at Marcus Devereaux and thought they saw an easy mark. A quiet black man in an old truck who'd take whatever they gave him, and they were half right. He was quiet, but quiet isn't weak. His quiet was the discipline of a man who'd spent 20 years learning that you don't show your hand until the moment it changes everything. They mistook his silence for surrender. It was the exact opposite. It was a man handing them all the rope they could ever want and waiting, patient as stone, for them to finish tying the knot. Think back to how this started. A fist on a hood, a flashlight in his eyes, a duffel dropped in the dark, two men so sure of who was in charge, and the whole time the man in the cuffs already knew how it ended. He just let them get there on their own. Marcus went back to work that Monday. Same badge. Same dog. He doesn't tell this story much. When people find out and ask him how he stayed so calm with his hands cuffed and a felony being read to his face, he usually just shrugs. But one time, a young agent pushed him on it, and Marcus gave an answer worth holding on to. "Respect you have to demand," he said, "was never really yours in the first place. The kind that's yours you can afford to wait for. It always comes. Sometimes it comes with a badge and a wet jacket and 4 sets of headlights on a dark road, but it comes." Then he clipped Ranger's leash on, and the two of them walked out into a morning that had, finally, gone quiet in the right way. And that tail light, he never let it go out again.